Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Photographers Inside the Photographer's Mind. I'm your host Dan Jin, and this week I'm joined by LA-based photographer Kristin Bedford. Kristin joins me on the episode to talk about her photo book, Cruise Night. It's an exploration of the Mexican-American lowrider community throughout California and Nevada. She shares with me what it was like putting the work together, shooting it, developing the book, sequencing and editing, and why sometimes her approach to creativity may get a few publishers a little bit concerned. We'll also be looking at her future projects, how she got into photography, her interesting and some may say unorthodox childhood, and how that led her to street photography. I'll be talking about several other things in between. Guys, if you are enjoying the podcast, then please do subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment, let us know what you think. Hit a like, share the podcast. Same as well if you're listening on either Google, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. So sit back, enjoy the show, and listen to this hour of photography conversation with myself and Kristin Bedford. Hello, Kristin.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you.
So you're in the comfort of your own home in LA. Is that what we're doing now?
Yeah, so I have a home studio as well as an art studio, and this is my little 150 square foot home studio that I had to create during the pandemic because it wasn't always wise to go out to my art studio, especially when we were in lockdown. So
how quickly did you have? So obviously when the pandemic started, and things started shutting down, how quickly did you have to make your home studio to be able to keep kind of working and creating? What was the turnaround?
It was a journey. So the mayor of Los Angeles told us we had to leave on March 19th, like our work buildings. And it was like I was moving out at 11 p.m. on March 19th. Like it was like this crazy hustle. And then I thought I would try the dining room because it's bigger than this room. But being off the kitchen was a disaster because you have like everything I do is paper based. You can see printers and paper. And being there in the kitchen was like an absolute mess. And so then I was like, all right, you're smelling, olive oil. I don't know. It was just not great. So then I cleared out my guest room, which is 150 square feet. My art studio is 700 square feet. So this is a big difference. But it's great.
Big difference.
It's great for what I need to do. Fine.
So if you're used to having kind of more space, like what were the main challenges being in such a confined space, and did it kind of impact the way that you made photographs? Like what kind of work were you able to do in the home studio?
So it lined up serendipitously with where I was with the project. So in the making of my book Cruise Night, which came out in April of this year, I spent years printing photos and discerning which photos would be in the book. And every time I'd go out and shoot, and my process is just to look at the photos and then intuitively print ones that felt good to me. And often there's very few photos that feel right to me. I mean, I take a lot of fine photos, but it's like the ones that are like sort of move me, And so I had all these tables. And I would print, maybe one photo, two if you're lucky, and put them on these tables. And the way I work is I have no agenda with a project whatsoever. Once I start shooting, I don't have an agenda. And so over the years, the photos are just creating like their own narrative. Like you can see how the work speaks to each other. You can move them around. And so having all that space made sense for the process of making the work, printing the work, discerning the work. When we were ordered to go home was when I was actually laying out the book. So I had already chosen the books and the quotes. There's oral history mixed in with the photographs. And so this size space was fine for laying it out. Because I was using software and so it was fine for where I'm at, but I've started my next book and I'm a little curious how that is going to go. So we'll see. I was thinking about taking out all my living room furniture and just filling it with tables. Not very social, but whatever. And it's LA. We can sit outside. And just filling it with tables so I can do this same process. I don't know. I'm going to figure it out. So with this new project, but I'm also just starting, so I don't have years and years of photos. But we'll see.
With the book Cruise Night, so you said that you kind of, when you initially start shooting certain things, you kind of let them develop themselves in terms of like stories, patterns, and things like that. You've obviously done a few projects over the years. With Cruise Night, what was kind of the clicking point where you thought that's going to be a book, that's going to be a photo book, and I need to start creating that now? What was the whether the clicking point is the right term, or the motivation for that particular project to turn it into a book?
It was very, very early on, like extremely early, like maybe just a couple months in, because I really believe in maybe like the democratic principle in photography, that it's, it should be accessible. Abraham Lincoln, says, by the people, for the people, of the people, right? So there's this, I believe in a kind of democracy in it. And a book is the best vehicle for that. Most people can't get across town to a gallery or a museum with like really specific hours, especially if you have multiple jobs and family. And it's very limiting. But if you can get something in a library, bookstores, or online, then it becomes accessible to all sorts of people. So it was very, very early on. And I decide everything, not decide, but I know exactly how I want everything to be immediately. Like, it's not even a process. Like, I started the project in December 2014. Okay. And then I'd say in, February 2015, I was having a cup of coffee and I was like, it will be called Cruise Night. It will be the size of an LP, it will be blue, and it will be metallic lettering, it's boss, like, it's going to look like this. And that was exactly, so I knew exactly what it would look like the whole time. Oh, here it is. I brought one out for you.
Absolutely, yes. Excellent. Yes.
So this was just like a cup of coffee a couple months in. And then the project lasted for 5 years, but I always knew. Yeah. And there was many people who wanted me to change this. Many people. So, but they didn't know. It was like already decided.
When you say, I mean, I don't know how much you can share, but when you say people, are we talking kind of like publishers, like who was trying to change it? And are you able to share why or what they were trying to change?
I mean, it was from all over: distributors, publishers, kind of from the universe. All sorts of things. One big thing is that you need to have like a famous curator, respected academic, somebody of note write a foreword introduction, for your book. And I don't give a fuck about any of that. Like, this is bullshit to me. I'm a street photographer, so like I don't care what your job title is. And the only text I wanted in it was the voice of the lowriders, because honestly, they're the only people who know what this culture is. Like, I'll just show you. And I did, like hours of interviews, and I just took, you can see how short the quotes are.
Yep.
And they're like, 100, 200, 300 words. And they're kind of like magical. I wanted, the sort of poetry there. And it kind of is part of the flow. And it's like a little break between the photos. And it just conveys their voice and the sort of beauty and transcendence of lowriding, which is what the book is about. So, I just always knew. So that was an ongoing thing, that to sell books, you have to have a famous person write something. And I mean, there's a lot of problems with that. One, most people don't know about lowriding. It hasn't been something that has been shared with the art world that much.
What
And
attracted you to lowriding initially? What was the attraction?
so all of my projects, everything comes from an interest in social justice
Okay.
and civil rights, and how people who are groups of people are marginalized in greater society express their voice. It can be through the arts, it can be through religion, but vehicles for having a place for expression. And so in the case of lowriding, it is a worldwide phenomenon. It's done blacks, whites, Asians, Mexicans, everybody, right?
Yeah.
But in Los Angeles, it has a really, really distinct significance for Mexican Americans. And we have a gigantic black population of lowriding too, but it has a different meaning for them. For over 70 years, the Mexican community here has been customizing cars, and it is a form of expression of identity, political, cultural, social, and so it has. So I come to it with a very specific thing, that customization is about, the customizing of a car is about that expression of civil rights and identity, and then it's specifically only about Mexican Americans.
It's interesting you say that, because I'm located in Mexico now, as you know, and maybe some listeners and watchers don't know that. And I do street photography as well, and I've always been fascinated with people. I think as street photographers we are, but here in Mexico, the amount of photographs I've made of vehicles and cars and different things like that, and the level of detail and diversity of vehicles and they'll change depending on which part of the country that you're in, is wonderful. Like, I'm not educated enough to say about lowriding or anything like that, but just to kind of double down on the culture of vehicles and how serious they are, and how it is a part of identity. You certainly realize that when you're here in Mexico. We certainly don't have that culture in England, but it's we're on the other side of the world. I just want to pick up. Sorry, go on. Oh, sorry.
It's actually different in different areas. So in Mexico, lowriding has a different significance than it does in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, we had the suit riots. We've had deportation of Mexicans for many decades. It's not just, currently, it dates back to the 20s, actually. So we have a certain political environment that people are responding to that's unique to this place, which Mexico has its own story and its own environment, but it is different. And the big lowriding place, the biggest epicenter is TJ, Tijuana in Mexico. I don't know if you went to TJ. And
no.
There are clubs in England. I'm friends with them. I can connect you when you go home if you want to hang out with some UK lowriders.
I don't know if I would fit in with the community, but I would always do my best. But no, that'd be interesting, because in England it's just I've not been there for so long, but I would never. It's just not something that we see, really, but like you say, they do exist. Just on the topic of you saying that you make your decisions very quickly, I think one curse for photographers, or people in general, but a lot of photographers have a curse of where they overthink things. So they'll spend too long developing an idea or changing it, and doing multiple things to the point either they're never happy or the work doesn't get done. Now, with you obviously said you started it, and then by 6 months later, you already knew what it was going to look like and how it was going to be, which is fantastic. But what is kind of the downsides as a creative of being? I don't want to say you're being impulsive. That sounds rude, but for thinking so quickly and acting with the first kind of concept that you have, is there ever a downside to that?
So there's two parts to my process. One is that I come to a community with this political, social interest.
Yeah.
Once I get to a community, I release all mission. It just gets me to the door. So I'm not a photojournalist. I'm not on assignment. I don't need to cover anything. I literally can just do whatever I feel like. So I just follow my intuition and I just sort of live in mystery. I don't know what a story is about. When I print all those photos and put them on the table, I have no agenda at all. I let the photos reveal what the story is.
Yeah.
I don't ever put any intellectual, like it's going to be about women and children or, whatever. I don't ever put down that. So it is twofold. But in terms of the way things look visually, like a material object or the name, that's who I am. I mean, I've always had a clear vision of, a creative vision. And that's what I offer. Overall, that's what I am. I can produce a lot, and I have a lot of ideas about color and graphics, typeface, and so that's who I am. I don't see a downside in it. I mean, actually, it frees me up. I know how I want to see things. So
I think a lot of
object, the actual body of work, I don't ever know. In fact, you could come to my studio and you'd be like, so what's the project about? And I was like, just experience the photo. I don't, and I think to create something new and something honest and something like truthful for yourself, that just sort of being open to what the work says is very key. I think if you have a construct going into a project, you might just be repeating all other work that's happened before. Constructs, I think, can be the trap.
I would agree with that. And I think there'll be a lot of people watching and listening this with a little dose of envy, because yes, some people do just kind of try and meticulously plan every single thing, overthink it, and never get to where they want to be. But your kind of free expression approach to it has obviously allowed you to create in a way that you want and also be productive. The evidence of that is the book. You got the book done. There's people, photographers, who talk about making a book for decades and it never happens, and you've been able to figure out how to do it kind of without totally overthinking it, and also do it to a high degree of quality as well. So I think, that's credit to you, and a lot of people will be jealous about that. Now, you said you're a street photographer. I just wondered, like, how did you get into that? I mean, LA's great. Did you grow up in LA? Is that how was your early beginnings with photography and street photography and things like that? How did that develop?
So my father was single. I grew up with a single dad, and he was this what he called back then, you called a political filmmaker. They didn't use the term documentary when I was a kid. That's a relatively new term. So he gave me a camera when I was 5.
Nice.
And I actually just recently found the first 3 photos I ever took. I kind of want to put them on my website, like early work, 5-year-old Kristen. And I really like these photos. Like you can see, I kind of spent some time. I lined up all the cereal boxes from Height, all the Kellogg's products. And then the first one I took is of my dad waking up, and his hair is all crazy. And I don't know. I like them. I think I'm going to put them on my website.
And you should.
Yeah, definitely. They're cool. I like them, And so I started then with cereal boxes of my dad at age 5. And he was very poor, but he managed to give me, like, kind of upgrade me over the years. I think the very, very first camera was some point and shoot, little kid, but pretty soon by like 7, I had like a manual 35 millimeter camera. And so I grew up in Washington, D.C., and in the city itself. And I definitely had no parental supervision as a child. And I was often the school bus dropped me off at my dad's office.
Right.
And so that was in downtown DC. So for, other kids play soccer after school or they go to someone's house. I was just walking around downtown DC after school.
Okay.
And, my dad would work pretty late. editing films and stuff. So I just took pictures that way. And because he was a filmmaker, I saw a lot of films my whole life, starting very young. And I think that probably shaped me in a way, like, not that the films I was watching particularly were like street photography, but I think seeing how people explore the world, that like Federico Fellini and Terrence Malick and Fritz Lang, film noir has always been a big deal for me. And then also, I don't really have any photographic influences. However, I did learn about Luigi when I was very young. And I've always found him very affirming. This is a bizarre juxtaposition of words, but his work with Murder Inc. was very affirming to me.
Okay.
And the fact that like I was like, oh, there's this guy who does things like how I feel I want to do them. Like as a teenager, even today, I don't think it's ever changed. I would be happy to live in a one-room studio across from a police station and have a police radio to be able to get to crime scenes before the police do. Yeah, that like makes sense to me. Murder is my business was what was over his bed when he was photographing murdering. And I really feel that. And if you ever come to my house, that is the name of my Wi-Fi network. So if you drive, it's my business.
Just swiping through that. Oh.
Process. So like, I don't know. I think seeing somebody like that too was like, oh yeah, you can just be on the street. You can just like go there. It wasn't till much later, I would say, that I saw the work of like Gary Winogrand or anybody. But again, it was just like, oh, there's people doing this. I wouldn't say these people influenced me, but it was kind of the process was shaping, I guess.
I don't want to turn this into a therapy session, but I do have a question about when you were a child.
Should I lie down?
No.
My eyes and like, can you hypnotize me?
I'm going to get a range of images and I'm going to be like, Kristen, what do you see in this image? And see how dark it gets. But no. But some people may be listening and they may think, as a child getting dropped off on the school bus, your dad's in work, for whatever reason, your mum's not around and you're on your own. But my question is, you, instead of like going out and doing like school club or whatever the hell they call it, whilst you're going around, you're on your own, you're making photos around DC. Were you content and happy as a child doing that? How did it feel doing that?
Oh, I was extremely lonely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was extremely lonely, but I've always had like a vision about how like I want to explore things. And so there's always been this part of me a large part of me that can just explore things with the camera, even if I'm lonely or not lonely. It was like very sad and very inappropriate childhood. I mean, because when my dad would stop working, we would go to bars. So, I had, and the thing is like, this is like really technical, but like today kids are driven around everywhere. They're like, they get off and then someone picks them up and they're taken to soccer. And then that didn't used to be the case. Like where the school bus drops you off is where you
yeah. Figure it out after that.
There's like no other chapter, like, and now I'm going to blah, blah, blah. Like, unless you were in your neighborhood and there was like Girl Scouts and you walked to it. But my dad was in downtown LA and actually then it was the big like prostitution area. So I actually photographed prostitutes when I was younger. And then and then it was like a lot of downtown was very sort of rough. And there was like lots of art studios and like music venues. It's kind of that abandoned, like, it's like an abandoned urban area. So there was a lot of creative people. His office was in this building called 930. This building was 930 F Street, and anybody from DC will be like, "Yeah, that's badass." So there was this thing called the 930 Club. It still exists. And it was there. So when we would be, at night, we would hear all the musicians on the ground floor, and we'd go down and hear music. So I heard all these people. It was an incredibly inappropriate childhood. I was never around children. I was always around adults.
What was it? So when
even in my therapy,
no.
I will say this. I'll say this. When you are like a latchkey kid, or you're in some weird non-parental supervision, I think you become creative. You have to survive. You have to figure stuff out on your own. And you have a lot of time to yourself. And I mean, you could be a reader, you could be, but I'm a visual person. So for me, it was a time that I used to cultivate that, and so I wasn't, so I mean, I spent a lot of time on it as a kid. And I think, being an only kid in that format really provided a lot of space for me to grow and take pictures.
Yeah, I think that's the wonderful element of unorthodox and I imagine often difficult early experience in life is that it allowed you to develop this relationship with something else that is photography, and it shapes you and your identity, I imagine, as a photographer. I mean, I can't imagine. So you're there. You said you're photographing prostitutes, which I'm sure. So, how old are you at this point in your life when you're having? Is it kind of portraits? Are you doing candid work? Are you having an interaction with them?
I usually talk to everybody. So I would talk. I mean, they're out on the street, so it was easy to talk to them. They're like on the street or in the corner or in front of the places where you go inside to meet with them. And I don't know, probably 7.
7 years old.
Yeah.
That is
around 7. And so I was doing that. And, adults really encouraged me because I was around creative adults. I was very, very encouraged by everyone. They sort of respected me. And I think that actually helped, is that they treated me like an equal. I don't know if you're in a traditional kid environment, if people are like, good job, Dan, yay, nobody ever talked to me that way.
No.
I think one of the more meaningful moments was, as I mentioned, my dad took me to lots of parties and bars, and was when I, on my own, went up to Warhol and Basquiat. I was very little. And my dad, I don't know, he was drinking and flirting or something. He was a real ladies' man. And Basquiat was he looked right at me like I was his equal. I didn't know who he was at the time because Warhol was famous. And I didn't know. It was only later I realized who he was. And he's like, so what do you do? What are you working on these days? And I was a street photographer. And honestly, I don't even know where I heard those words. I don't even know. It was I must have heard them somewhere. And I was like, I'm the street photographer. And Warhol they were like, oh, interesting. They kind of asked me about it. And Basquiat was very supportive. He's like, you go, girl. Right, you do your thing. And so, I mean, I think that's a good example of people who just treated me, like I was one of them. And I think while it was totally inappropriate to always be with adults as a child, the benefit of being with all these creative people was that they supported and believed in me.
Yeah.
In whatever I wanted to do. Whatever. I could have done anything and people would have been like, yeah.
And so that's DC. The switch to LA, was that motivated by photography? Oh
no, I was in love and I couldn't imagine being without him. Oh, my life would have been over. What would I have done? And he got a job out here in LA. And so I moved. And I say here that I tell people I came for love and sunshine, and the sunshine worked out.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, we were together for like a minute once I got here, and everybody's like, "Oh, are you going to go back east?" And I was like, "No, this seems pretty cool. Like, this is another planet. LA is another planet. It's nothing like DC or New York or Chicago or anything." And so I stayed, and I quickly realized the light here is incredible. And even though there's traffic and pollution and lots of crazy stuff, the light, I don't know if I could ever leave this light. It's just so transcendent. It's amazing. It's amazing.
It's beautiful, and you're right. I've been to LA once, and I spent about 3 weeks there, and I was the same. I was like, I've never been anywhere like this in my life. This is great, and for photography, it was wonderful. Like and the people you meet, and I thought, New York as a Brit, New York was quite an eye opener for me as well. And then I got to LA, and it was an even more of an eye opener, but in a different kind of way. You meet such diversity in these cities, and as street photographers, that's what. Well, you may agree or disagree, but from my perspective, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for different stories, but within the same place. I want to meet the people. I want to. I think sometimes street photographers, they like to go and photograph the people on the fringes, and I like that. But I like to know people from all walks of life: the rich, the poor, the middle class, the white, the brown, the black. And I think that's LA is a wonderful, wonderful spot with that, but without no offense to my New York friends or anyone listening from New York, it's without the gloominess and the aggression of New York City, from my perspective anyway. And I think
we say
very friendly.
Everybody on we greet everybody.
Yeah.
I was just in Paris for a show and book signing and everything during Paris Photo in November, just like last month. And I smile and I say bonjour, to everybody on the street, and it's like I have to train myself to not say hello, because the French are like, "Why you guys are so crazy, you Americans? Why do you greet everyone?"
I mean, the French
on the street, so I was like trying to control myself. It was hard though. It was hard not to say.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the French could maybe take note a little bit, no offense to the French people, but you could do with saying hi a little bit more. And I say that to every French person I met. So you're was it in Paris? You're in Paris, you say?
Yeah.
What's it like doing a book signing? I mean, you've developed this book. People are coming to see you. You're signing it. Is that a surreal? What's that feeling like? What's that experience like?
I wish I could speak more thoroughly to this, because as having a book that comes out in a pandemic, you didn't really have too many. So I wish I could have more. The biggest book signing was here in Los Angeles. There was a car show. The Lowriders organized. There was over 400 cars. Over 1,000 people came. And so that was kind of the big moment. That felt like the ultimate event, because the people who are in the book were there.
Yeah.
And that was really, really special, to get to hear. I mean, for so much, my book talks have been on Zoom, and so I felt disconnected, but it's just so much fun, to talk to people, and I'll write anything in your book that you want, So people in Paris were like, what kind of haircut do you think I should get? So I wrote like suggestions in the back of the book about hair. Like, I'm very unplugged. So whatever you want, I'll write it in different languages. So it's also just fun, to experience it and share it with people. It's not surreal. It's just a lot of fun. Yeah.
So there's a cliche in photography where people say the images should speak for themselves. Now, your book, you combine photographs and oral histories, and which is words from the Lowriders. What do you say to that cliche that the images should just speak for themselves and no words are necessary? And what for you is it's a two-part question. What for you is the benefit of combining imagery with the written word?
So there is very little oral history. It's quite small in comparison to the number of photos. I think there's like 7. It's really just like some poetry to sort of mix in. But it's primarily photos, and I get really distracted at wall text and photo titles and things personally. And museum, I'll even try to like put my hand up, like don't read it, just try to take it in. So I have an index in the back with the titles and the correlating information for each photo, because I do want you just to experience the photo as it is. And what is without me telling you things, and I do think that the photo should, I would agree with that it should stand on its own. I'm friends with Burke Uzzle. Do you know who he is? He was one of the presidents of Magnum Photography, and he was the youngest life reporter or photographer ever hired. He was 17 years old, and and he's kind of a recluse now. He lives in like an old factory in North Carolina. And he has like old style. Henry Cartier-Bresson is the one who brought him in, so he's older. This guy's older.
Okay,
and he has an older mentality, or kind of like a magazine mentality, sort of, and an older Magnum mentality. Is sort of, he's just saying, you just lead with your strong stuff, and you just continue with your strong stuff.
Okay.
People like want to ease into it, and they have like transition photos. And I'm sort of more in the Burke Uzzle. Like, why shouldn't every photo be something that you feel is strong, that you believe in? I like a tight edit. I'm very rigorous. I do all my own editing. Everything I do is in isolation. Like, I make the work in community. But then everything, like selecting the photos, printing the photos, sequencing, choosing which ones, laying out the book, everything I did on my own. I don't want, because it's very personal to me, and it's all about my intuition, and only it's literally like reading my diary, the book, and like, having somebody give me feedback on my diary. It's like, no, you shouldn't have a crush on that boy in the 5th grade or something, like, no, it's just who you are. Right. So I do think that an edit should be strong, and I think it should be succinct, and I think that the photos should be able to stand on their own. But obviously, if you want to create a story, they need to be connected, and editing makes all the difference. Editing and sequencing are everything. I could sequence my photos, the exact photos in this book, to tell a completely different story than what is there.
Do you enjoy doing the editing and the sequencing? Do you enjoy doing that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like a meditative, like spiritual experience. Where I block everything out, and you just like go into like a zone, and like I just feel it, like music. It's like music,
When you first got the physical book in your hands and you looked at it, you saw it, it's there, it's real life. How do you feel about the book?
So I was terrified, and I actually didn't want to open it. Like, they sent me one, or two for me to see when it was done. And I didn't open it for months. I didn't even, if I never saw it, it would have been okay. I didn't need to ever see the book. Because I put so much into me that I was done with it. Like, I'm ready to do something else. And somebody told me that Dylan never listens to his albums. So I was like, yeah. Dylan doesn't listen to them. That's for me. I don't need to look at any book. Like, I literally poured all of my being into this book. So whether it looks like shit or it's fabulous, there's nothing I can do. Like I gave 100% of myself. So finally somebody was like, Kristen, you should really look at it. I don't know how I got convinced one day. Oh, I think I was going to do an interview and I was like, maybe I should look at it for an interview or something. Yeah, but it's sad. I even put it in my closet. I didn't even want to see the package. Yeah, I don't think I looked at it for 3 or 4 months. But once I opened it, to answer your question, that was a long aside.
No.
It turned out pretty much how I liked it. There's only one photo, which I'm not going to tell you which one, that doesn't seem on point. But I went on press during the pandemic to Italy, November 2020. It's like one of the height of their, the epicenter of the crisis.
Oh yeah, peak panic.
And it was very, very stressful, very difficult. But I felt really clear that I needed to be there to oversee the colors and especially skin tones. There's all different shades of brown in the Mexican community, and only I know that. And I'm only one who knows what the colors of these cars should be. A lot of them are famous cars. So, you do really want to have historical accuracy. So actually, I had seen all of the pictures because what you do is when you're on press, they print, a spread, and you go through and then you sign off of them, and then they print all of the pages right then and there. So I could see like palettes of pages. So I actually knew what everything would look like beforehand. But yeah, it looks good. There's only one picture I'm like, nah, this isn't 100%. Besides that, I like it. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a very, very strong success rate from your personal perspective. Just have one photo where you're a bit like, meh. I think that's a very strong success rate. At the beginning of the interview, you did mention that there's now another project in the works. Are we allowed to talk about that? Is there anything you can share?
I'm always very transparent. And there's nothing that you could say that would like discourage me or influence me. I'm very like tenacious and I'm very clear about what I want to do. So even if you're like, this is the worst idea in the world, it won't matter to me. So just to preface, don't feel like, you have to like censor yourself. If you're thinking, oh no, this is
oh dear. Okay.
I again think that's also like if you're a street photographer, there's like you're like calloused and like you're strong in a way too. Like you have to go out in the world. I don't know.
No, you do.
I can't say any other type. I've never done anything else. I've never done commercial or portraits or weddings or baptisms or anything. So I don't know what you need inside of you to do pets and things. But as a street photographer, I found that you kind of get like strong in that way. But it is called Heaven on Earth. And yes, I knew the name of the project immediately. And the name of the book. And it's about the most radical and radically successful utopian society in American history that existed from 1848 to 1881 in upstate New York.
Well, okay.
And so this is very different because these people are dead. So it's very different than getting to know thousands of lowriders in Los Angeles.
Are you having people dig up corpses and you're going in with your camera and you're
doing seances, ghost views, corpses, or like a Frankenstein thing where we bring someone back to life. Yeah, the whole thing. Exactly. So, and it's very significant. There's an element here, and that I'm a direct descendant of this society, this utopian society, because they had planned reproduction And they even created a program. At its height, it had 300 people. They had like a spiritual eugenics program where they wanted people who were like more humble, maybe more enlightened, more giving, more selfless to mate with each other.
Okay.
And so my great grandmother is the sixth child created in this program to create like a more enlightened population. There's a lot of really radical, even by today's standards, radical. They didn't believe in marriage. They believed in something called complex marriage, where everyone's married to each other. So you can have sexual relations with all sorts of people. It wasn't
you can you can or you can't.
You can.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yeah, you can have. But it wasn't like some sex fest. It was pretty organized. And you had interviews, and the women could reject. They could say no. And
that's
in
good.
the 1800s, that's pretty radical. Women wore pants. They cut their hair short. Men were in charge of birth control. Everything was communal. Everything was shared. They were very industrious. So they were just very, very radical people, and they built a structure, a 93,000 square foot home, a mansion that they all lived in, and it's a historic preservation site. So I live there because I get embedded in communities. So in this case, I lived there for the month of September, and then I'm going back in February in the cold snow.
So what exactly are you photographing? Because as you say, the people are no longer with us. Is there any? Are people trying to survive that community? Are people trying to keep it going, or is it? What's kind of the photographic focus?
So in 1881, it disbanded, and everybody integrated into regular society. People got married. They had their own homes. They had their own children. There was no communal living or complex marriage, or it all came to an end. So there's no carryover after that. But most people stayed in the community. Really, nobody left until my father's generation. He wanted to go make films in Manhattan, do drugs, and whatever, go to whatever he wanted to do. So, as I said, they were radically successful. And so one of the industries they had to keep their society afloat was making silverware. So when they disbanded in 1881, they incorporated the silverware company. So then it just became a company town. So nobody left the utopian society. They all stayed. They built houses. They got married, and they all just worked at the silverware company. So So I grew up visiting my grandparents there. And I played in this mansion as a child. And I think, people could ask, like, how did this influence me, or, anything, how does it trickle down? Is there any, I imagine people will ask, how is this trickling? Do you have some utopian ideals or blah, blah, blah? And I think the only way that I can realize at this point in the project that it influenced me is that I grew up thinking this was normal. I visited my grandparents who lived across the street, and that people could live in a way, it could be creative, and they could create a new reality. And this just seemed, you present these things to a kid and it's okay. People can all be married to each other. People can all have kids with different people, So I think that accepting that there's different realities as a norm is probably the biggest way that it's shaped me at this generation. So my 4 greats-grandparents were part of the founding. My 3 greats signed up for this like spiritual eugenics program, and then 2 greats are the result of it. So I have a direct link. So what am I photographing? The space, the ephemera, the experience of the place.
Yeah.
And then I'm doing stuff with archival images to sort of weave in and tell a story. And then I'm going to use some of my own archival photos. I think. I mean, when I edit it, I could totally be like, no, this sucks. I shouldn't have said any of that to Dan. Why did I say that? But I sort of see bringing it into the modern day that I grew up there. So it is more biographical, in that I've never done anything that involves myself, but it's also a photography project.
Not to, I'm not going to, pardon the expression, blow smoke up your ass just for the sake of doing it. I think it's I like the idea. I do like it. And I think it's a good lesson because I think we would both, yeah, not that you care, which is great. But no, I think it's a good lesson to photographers listening to this, that because I think we would both agree that this topic that you've just covered, just shared with us is very niche, very personal. And I think a lot of photographers, whether they're street, documentary, photojournalist, whatever they are, they tend to jump on trends, rather than, take a bit of a, hey, this might not land with people, but I like it. It's what I need to do. And hopefully it will transcend into, the minds of other people and they'll connect to it. I think it's better to do as a photographer, if you want to kind of succeed, whatever success means to you, I think taking the risks of doing stories that aren't necessarily trendy or common is going to be far more valuable than just doing what everyone else is doing. Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't know why you would do that, but I don't know why you would. Like, I make this all for myself. If nobody ever looked at my book, it wouldn't matter to me. I made it for myself. I do all my projects for myself. And every time I do a project, people are like, whoa, that's really different. How did you do that? Like I've lived with American religious movements who people call cults. I do think I live with people, or I spend a lot of time with them. And so I don't think I've ever thought about any project for anybody else but myself. Like, I just feel called to do it. So I don't know why people would do what you're saying. I trust that that's a thing, but I don't know.
As a...
I mean, if you're doing it to make money, like you see it has some commercial value, I guess following trends would be good, but I don't really care if there's any commercial value. So I think I just want to make things that are honest for me. That's all I care about. Like, I want to do as many projects that are just honest and intuitive to me before I die. It's just like a countdown to death, right? And if I start thinking about what's trendy, that just seems like a waste of time. Like, that's time I could have been doing something personal.
I think to answer the question, why would a person do that? From my experience as an editor of a photography website is, I think people do it because they want success, and they, instead of kind of stopping and thinking about what's true to them, they get oversaturated in their mind about what's the quickest route to success. I'll give you an example. I remember when, over the past 5-10 years, the trans movement has really taken hold, and it's become more. People have become more aware of it, and I noticed at the same time there was lots of photographers submitting work to me and the other editors that focused on trans rights, trans movements, but the photographer didn't necessarily have any affiliation to that movement, or some did, and we would give them a voice because they had the right things to say. But a lot of photographers just jump on these bandwagons, one, because it makes them look good in their opinion, and they think in a way they're kind of standing on the heads of communities to get ahead, rather than say what you do, immersing themselves in a community or sharing something of their own experience to tell a more authentic story. It's an unfortunate, part of our industry, of every industry, really. People do the things.
I don't know. I don't know what that success is, though. I don't understand what that means. Like, I mean, we have to go back to I was 7 years old talking to prostitutes doing street photography. So
Yeah.
I've always just been doing my own thing. I wasn't looking for any validation from anybody. So, I mean, everything I do is so like personal, and I do it quietly, and I do it alone, and I don't ever think about what anybody thinks. But I would want to like also position myself maybe slightly differently, and
Hmm.
then I do this synthesis of fine art and social realism. I don't really
Hmm.
use the term documentary because once something becomes a Netflix subcategory, I think it becomes problematic,
Hmm.
but like social realism. So everything I do is unstaged. Everything is natural. Every picture in Cruise Night is unstaged. It's somebody having a moment. I spend enough time with the community that they trust me, and I sort of just blend in, and I'm there. And so I don't know. So I think that the art part of me is like maybe that's where that like I don't care part. I don't know if that because I wouldn't call myself a documentary photographer or a photojournalist or anything like that. Usually I would actually describe myself as a fine art photographer, but everything I do is based on real life. It's
Yeah.
all natural. I don't know, maybe that influences the success story that you're talking about. I don't know.
Well, I guess you are right. What success is very different to different people, and I think maybe the fact that photography kind of found you. I know that sounds really overly spiritual or airy fairy, but the camera kind of fell in your hand through your father, whereas a lot of people nowadays, maybe younger generations, they're seeing success like popularity. Success could be measured today in terms of popularity, social media, stuff like that. And I think new photographers are getting too hooked on that rather than, say, photographers like yourself who are hooked on the process of creating and storytelling and giving a voice to certain communities and people that what I believe to be the real work. Again, I'm not trying to blow smoke up your ass here, but I'm trying to make the distinct difference and hopefully educate listeners and watchers that, if you're authentic, you will have maybe a more fulfilling career than if you're just going on the back of what's popular or what you think will make you popular. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting to think about social media platforms is they can go away. All your likes on Instagram and all your followers, these these platforms could go down. They'll change over time. And the things that we know will last actually are negatives more than digital files, right? Digital files degrade. We know negatives last. We know paper lasts if it's cared for properly, if it's good paper. We know books can last if they're taken care of. So you also think about, how you want to leave this work behind. And Instagram is not forever. Facebook is not forever, and if they do stay around, they're going to morph. I mean, Facebook has renamed itself. It wants to, it's these things, the digital stuff will constantly change. And we know, from over 100 years, what will last. And I think that that's also important to me. I mean, I was a darkroom photographer up until 2012. So I was shooting on the street with a speed graphic, 4x5. Actually, the camera Ouija used. And also mostly 35 millimeter. And so I'm very in touch with the material aspect of it. As I said, we have boxes and boxes of paper here. I'm very in touch with the material aspect. So, and I also, I feel that was lucky, maybe. Because when I also take photos, I think about how they're going to be printed, not what they'll look like on an iPhone screen on Instagram. So it is funny though, on my Instagram account, like I know which ones are going to get a lot of likes and which ones won't. And I almost laugh because I'm just going to post whatever I feel like, but I just laugh. I'm like, this one got 1,800 likes. This one got 19. But I don't like take it down because it like hurts my leg. But you kind of do know. You do know, sort of. But I guess it also depends on who follows you. You know, that probably actually also depends on how you would predict your likes.
The game of social media, it's a different beast, if you ask me. Now, I could sit here and probably ask you 4,000 more questions because you have a fascinating life and experience, but I'm not going to do that because, you know, we all have, you know, well, people's attention spans nowadays is, you know, we have to keep them in. So I from a podcast point, we will wrap it up. What I would say is with the book Cruise Nights, if people want it, they still want to get their hands on it. Can they still get their hands on a copy? Where can they do that? What's the best way to grab it?
That's a good question. It was the top selling book in the United States this year.
Oh yes.
And and it sold out in 4 weeks in the United States. And
that's
so
amazing.
In Europe, you can get, I think there's like 25 or 30 copies at the Polka Factory bookstore. Well, it's just called Polka Factory. It's like a gallery and bookstore in Paris. And it's sold online there. So that's the only place in Europe to get it. And then the only place in the United States to get it is a bookstore in Los Angeles called Skylight Books. And they also are online. And the only reason they have them is because the book sold out. And then we had this book release car show and there were no books. So bless their heart. This is like the little guy independent bookstore. They paid for shipping to have them come from Europe so that we would have books for the car show. And so what they have are the ones that didn't sell at the car show, the remaining. Once those two places, once Skylight Books and Polka Factory sell, then that's it. There's no more. So I think there's probably maybe a total of 80 books left. Maybe, I would guess 80 to 90 books left.
Allowing me to paraphrase what you just said, if you do want a copy of the book, be quick, be quick because there's not many left. So go and get them. I will put links and all that jazz down in descriptions and in articles because if I ask you to start saying what's your website and Instagram, it's just going to go in people's ears and out the other one because, it's how we are now. So I will put links to where they can find you and get in touch with you and things like that. And I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me and share so much about your history as a person and your photographic journey and obviously the story behind the book as well, Cruise Nights. It's been a wonderful conversation with you, Kristen.
Yeah, and maybe we can keep our therapy sessions going.
Yeah.
I have some stuff to work through.
Yeah.
New series, the dance therapy.
Dance therapy. Well, I was actually trained in counseling and psychotherapy in my early 20s, and then I realized that was absolutely not what I wanted to do. So maybe there is a bit of that in me that still comes through.
Therapy. That could be like a whole new, you could like merge both fields.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I like the idea of it.
I'll keep that in mind. Excellent, Kristen. Well, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. See you later.
Okay.
Well, thanks again to Kristen for speaking with me. I'm sure you enjoyed that episode just as much as I enjoyed having the conversation with her. We've got links if you would like to purchase Cruise Night. In the description down below, we've got links to the European stores and the North American stores. And you can also catch up with Kristen via her social media sites and her websites, which you'll also find in the description below. Guys, just a quick reminder, if you are enjoying Inside the Photographer's Mind, then please do show your support. Hit a subscribe, hit a like, share it, whatever platform you're listening to, then make sure you can support the show and then we can keep bringing you this fresh content on a weekly basis. I'm Dan Jin, and I'll be back again next week with another episode of the Photographers Inside the Photographer's Mind. See ya.